Jake Morrison returned to the dead planet 3 more times. Each visit revealed new secrets hidden in the Valdari ruins. Maya Rodriguez worked day and night to understand the alien technology. She found that the crystal device was more than just a recording system. It was a machine designed to help people work together by sharing their thoughts and feelings in a safe way. The Valdari had built many of these devices, but they had activated them too late. By the time they realized what was happening to their civilization, the invisible enemy had already turned too many of their people against each other. The devices could not overcome the hatred and suspicion that had been planted in Valdari minds over many years. Maya brought back pieces of the alien technology and began building a human version. She worked with engineers from 12 different colonies, sharing information freely even though their governments were starting to distrust each other. The engineers noticed something strange. When they worked together on the Valdari technology, they felt calmer and more focused. The angry thoughts that had been bothering them for months seemed to fade away. Meanwhile, the situation across human space grew worse every day. On New Texas colony, Governor Ben Harper watched his people tear their own city apart. Neighbors, who had helped each other for years, now fought over imaginary crimes. Workers destroyed the farms and factories they had built with their own hands. Ben tried to keep order, but his own security forces were turning against each other. Dr. Nina Foster watched the same madness spread through Jupiter Research Station. Scientists who had worked together peacefully for decades now refused to share their research. They accused each other of stealing ideas and sabotaging experiments. Nina realized that the station would destroy itself within weeks if something did not change. Captain Ryan Brooks commanded a merchant fleet that carried supplies between human worlds. His ships were some of the few places where people still worked together properly. Brooks noticed that his crews stayed calm and focused as long as they remained in space. But whenever they landed on a planet or station, the madness began to affect them too. Something on the human worlds was poisoning people's minds. Admiral Lisa Kane studied all the reports and began to see the true size of the threat. The enemy was not just making humans angry. They were specifically targeting the bonds that held human society together. Family members turned against each other. Business partners became enemies. Political allies started wars over nothing. It was a perfect strategy for destroying a species without firing a single shot. Alex Chen worked alone in his laboratory on Luna Station, protected by layers of shielding that blocked most outside signals. He studied brain scans from affected humans and compared them to historical data from before the crisis began. What he found confirmed his worst fears. Human neural patterns were being altered by some kind of external influence. The changes were subtle but effective. The parts of the brain that controlled trust and cooperation were being suppressed. The areas that generated fear and anger were being stimulated. But the process was not perfect. Some humans seemed naturally resistant to the manipulation. Others could fight it off when they were in groups of people who truly trusted each other. Jake Morrison volunteered to be the first test subject for Maya's prototype device. She had built it using Valdari technology combined with human brain science. The device looked like a simple headband with small crystals embedded in the metal. When Jake put it on, he felt a warm sensation spread through his mind. Suddenly, Jake could sense the emotions of his crew members. He felt Maya's excitement about her work and Alex's worry about the future. He experienced their thoughts not as invasions of his privacy, but as shared experiences that made him understand them better. Most importantly, he felt the artificial anger and suspicion that had been planted in his mind fade away like fog in sunlight. Maya tried the device next, then Alex, then the security officers. Each person who used it reported the same thing. The constant background noise of negative emotions disappeared. They could think clearly for the first time in months. They felt connected to each other in a way that made cooperation feel natural and easy. But the device had limitations. It only worked when people chose to trust each other. It could not force anyone to cooperate against their will. This was actually its greatest strength. Unlike the enemy's mind control, the Valdari technology respected human free will and individual choice. Admiral Kane organized a secret network of humans who were still unaffected by the manipulation. She called them the Clear Minds, and they began working together to save their species. Governor Harper used his authority to quietly distribute prototype devices to key people on New Texas. Dr. Foster did the same on Jupiter Station. Captain Brooks carried devices to merchant crews throughout the outer colonies. The results were immediate and dramatic. Communities that had been tearing themselves apart suddenly began working together again. Families reconciled overnight. Workers returned to their jobs and began repairing the damage they had caused. The devices seemed to act like medicine for a disease that attacked the human soul. But the enemy noticed what was happening. Across human space, the mental attacks became stronger and more focused. People who were not protected by the devices began acting with extreme violence. They attacked anyone who seemed too calm or too cooperative. The invisible war was becoming a real one. Jake Morrison's ship became a mobile command center for the Clear Minds network. They traveled from world to world, delivering devices and teaching people how to use them. But they had to work in secret. The enemy's influence was so strong in some places that humans would attack anyone who offered them a way to think clearly. On Earth itself, the situation was the worst of all. Entire cities were in chaos. The planetary government had collapsed, as politicians turned against each other with savage fury. Only a few isolated groups remained functional, hidden in deep bunkers or remote locations where the enemy's influence was weaker. Alex Chen made a disturbing discovery while studying the enemy's methods. The attacks on human minds were not random. They followed a pattern that suggested intelligence and planning. Somewhere out in space, something was watching human civilization and carefully orchestrating its destruction. The enemy knew exactly how to break the bonds that held human society together. Maya Rodriguez worked frantically to mass-produce the devices, but she faced constant sabotage from people under enemy influence. Factories that started making the devices would suddenly suffer mysterious accidents. Workers would destroy their own equipment for no logical reason. The enemy was fighting back against humanity's attempts to save itself. The war for human survival was being fought inside people's minds, and humanity was losing. But Jake Morrison, Lisa Kane, and their allies refused to give up. They had found a weapon that could fight the invisible enemy, and they would use it to save their species. The question was whether they could spread the cure fast enough to prevent humanity from destroying itself completely. Dr. Alex Chen called his discovery the Unity Protocol. The name came from watching how humans changed when they used the Valdari devices. They did not lose their individual personalities or become mindless drones. Instead, they became more themselves, while also becoming part of something larger. It was like watching musicians in an orchestra, each playing their own part but creating beautiful music together. The protocol worked by creating connections between human minds, but only when people chose to open those connections. Trust had to come first. Then the device would amplify the natural human ability to work together and understand each other. The artificial hatred and fear that the enemy planted simply could not survive in an environment of genuine cooperation. Jake Morrison's crew became the first group to live with the protocol active all the time. They wore the devices constantly and shared their thoughts and emotions freely. The changes in their behavior amazed everyone who saw them. They worked together with impossible efficiency, solving problems that would have taken weeks in just hours. They seemed to know what each other needed before anyone asked. Maya Rodriguez used the shared knowledge of the crew to modify their ship in ways that should have been impossible. With everyone's expertise flowing together through the protocol, she designed new systems that combined the best human and Valdari technology. The Aurora's Edge became the most advanced ship in human space, capable of speeds and maneuvers that seemed to break the laws of physics. Word of their success spread through Admiral Kane's secret network. Groups of humans on dozens of worlds began implementing the Unity Protocol in their own communities. The results were always the same. Chaos turned to order. Enemies became allies. Problems that had seemed impossible to solve were handled with ease. On New Texas Colony, Governor Ben Harper watched his world transform. The protocol spread from person to person as people saw how much better life became for those who used it. Families that had been destroyed by artificial hatred reunited with tears of joy. Workers who had sabotaged their own projects now worked overtime to repair the damage. The colony that had been dying became stronger than it had ever been before. Dr. Nina Foster saw the same changes on Jupiter Research Station. Scientists began sharing their research freely instead of hoarding it. They collaborated on projects that would benefit all humanity instead of competing for personal glory. Breakthrough discoveries that might have taken years were made in weeks, as brilliant minds worked together without fear or suspicion. Captain Ryan Brooks became a key part of Admiral Kane's strategy. His merchant ships carried protocol devices to isolated human settlements throughout the galaxy. But more importantly, his crews demonstrated how the protocol worked in practice. When people saw Brooks's crews working together with perfect trust and efficiency, they wanted to experience the same thing for themselves. The enemy's response was swift and brutal. Humans who refused to use the protocol began attacking those who did with increasing violence. On some worlds, civil wars broke out between the clear minds and those still under enemy influence. The invisible war was becoming very visible, and humans were killing humans in battles that served only the enemy's purpose. Admiral Kane realized that they needed to move faster. Every day that passed meant more human communities destroyed themselves. She launched Operation Starbridge, a plan to coordinate all human military forces using the Unity Protocol. It was a desperate gamble that could either save humanity or destroy what remained of human civilization. The operation began with Kane's own fleet. Every ship captain, every crew member, every soldier who volunteered received a protocol device. The transformation was immediate. Fleets that had been barely functional due to internal conflicts suddenly operated like precision machines. Ships that had been enemies began working together toward their common goal of human survival. Jake Morrison was promoted to admiral and given command of the exploration forces. His job was to find more Valdari ruins and technology, while also spreading the protocol to human colonies in the Outer Rim. It was dangerous work, as many of those colonies were now completely under enemy control and would attack any ship that approached. Maya Rodriguez established a network of hidden factories throughout human space. Each factory was staffed entirely by people using the protocol, making them immune to sabotage from within. They worked around the clock to produce devices and ship them to communities that were ready to accept them. The factories had to be hidden because enemy-controlled humans would destroy them if they were discovered. Alex Chen made another crucial discovery while studying the enemy's methods. The attacks on human minds came from specific locations in space. By tracking the patterns of influence, he could identify where the enemy ships were hiding. This gave Admiral Kane's forces actual targets to strike at, instead of just defending against invisible attacks. The first battle against the real enemy took place near the Proxima Centauri system. Kane's unified fleet detected an enemy ship hiding in the asteroid belt. The ship was enormous, larger than anything humans had ever built, and it radiated the same kind of mental influence that had been destroying human civilization. The battle was unlike anything in human history. The enemy ship had weapons that attacked minds instead of hulls. Crew members who were not protected by the protocol began turning on each other even as the battle raged. But the humans with active protocol devices remained calm and focused. They worked together with perfect coordination, while the enemy struggled to understand why their primary weapon was not working. Admiral Kane's fleet destroyed the enemy ship, but not before learning something terrifying. The ship was not alone. There were dozens more hidden throughout human space, and beyond them was a vast alien empire that had been destroying species for millions of years. The enemy called themselves the Convergence Council, and they had never encountered a species that could resist their mental manipulation. The victory at Proxima Centauri gave humanity hope, but also revealed the true scale of their enemy. The Convergence Council had been preparing to harvest humanity for decades, slowly weakening human civilization until it collapsed from within. They had done the same thing to hundreds of other species throughout the galaxy, but humanity had something the other species had lacked. The protocol did not just protect humans from enemy influence, it made them stronger than they had ever been, as individuals. When humans truly trusted each other and worked together, they could accomplish things that no single person or even traditional group could achieve. Jake Morrison led a strike force to investigate more Valdari ruins and found evidence that the ancient species had not been completely destroyed. Some Valdari had escaped to hidden worlds where they had continued to develop their technology. These survivors had been waiting for another species to discover the protocol and use it successfully. The news that humanity was winning the war against the Convergence Council spread through the protocol network faster than any official communication system. Humans throughout the galaxy began to hope for the first time in months. Communities that had been hiding in fear emerged and began fighting back against the enemy's influence. The protocol continued to spread from person to person, family to family, world to world. Each new human who joined the network made all the others stronger. The connections between minds created a collective intelligence that retained individual personality while solving problems no single human could handle alone. Admiral Kane prepared for the next phase of the war. Now that humanity knew who their enemy was and where to find them, it was time to take the fight to the Convergence Council itself. The future of the human species, and perhaps the entire galaxy, would depend on whether humans could maintain their unity when faced with an enemy that had conquered countless worlds. The Convergence Council had ruled the galaxy for over 2 million years. Their empire included thousands of species, all of them destroyed from within by the Council's ability to turn people against each other. The Council members themselves were ancient beings who had long ago given up physical bodies to exist as pure mental energy. They fed on the chaos and destruction they created, growing stronger each time a civilization fell. Overlord Kethmore was the oldest and most powerful of the Council. He had personally overseen the destruction of over 300 species, including the Valdari. When he learned that humanity was resisting the Council's influence, he felt something he had not experienced in millennia. Fear. No species had ever developed immunity to the Council's mental manipulation. If humans could teach their resistance to other species, the entire Council empire would be at risk. Admiral Lisa Kane studied intelligence reports about the Council's forces and realized that humanity faced an impossible enemy. The Council commanded fleets from dozens of conquered species. They had weapons that could destroy entire star systems and technology that was millions of years ahead of anything humans had developed. In any normal war, humanity would be crushed within days. But this was not a normal war. The Unity Protocol had given humans abilities that the Council did not understand and could not counter. Human fleets now operated with perfect coordination across vast distances. Individual ships performed maneuvers that seemed to break the laws of physics as their crews worked together with inhuman precision. Jake Morrison led the first major assault on a Council stronghold. His expanded fleet included ships from every human colony that had adopted the protocol. They moved through space like a single organism, each ship knowing exactly where every other ship would be at any moment. When they engaged the enemy, their attacks were perfectly timed and coordinated. The Council forces were commanded by the Zephyrian species, proud warriors who had served the Council for 50,000 years. Their commander, war leader Vextal, had conquered hundreds of worlds and never known defeat. But he had never faced an enemy that could predict his every move and counter it instantly. The battle lasted 18 hours and ended with the complete destruction of the Council fleet. Not a single human ship was lost, while the enemy's supposedly invincible forces were scattered across the void. The Zephyrian survivors broadcast a message of surrender, begging the humans not to destroy their homeworld. Maya Rodriguez analyzed the captured enemy technology and made a shocking discovery. The Council's advanced weapons were not built by the Council themselves. They were created by the species the Council had conquered, forced to work as slaves while their civilizations were destroyed. The Council had no real technology of their own beyond their ability to manipulate minds. Dr. Nina Foster led a team of scientists in developing new applications for the Unity Protocol. They found that humans connected through the protocol could solve complex problems by literally sharing their intelligence. A group of connected humans became smarter than the sum of their parts, capable of insights that no individual could achieve alone. Alex Chen discovered something even more important while studying the Council's methods. The enemy's power was not unlimited. They could only effectively control a certain number of minds at once, and their influence weakened with distance. The more humans who joined the protocol network, the harder it became for the Council to affect any of them. Captain Ryan Brooks had become Admiral Brooks, commanding the logistics network that kept human forces supplied across the galaxy. His crews used the protocol to coordinate supply runs with impossible efficiency. They could deliver exactly the right supplies to the right place at the right time, as if they could predict the future. The Council's response to their defeats was to abandon subtlety entirely. Overlord Kethmore ordered direct attacks on human worlds using weapons that could burn entire continents. If the Council could not turn humans against themselves, they would simply destroy humanity before the resistance could spread to other species. The siege of Earth began with a fleet of 10,000 enemy ships surrounding humanity's homeworld. The Council had gathered forces from across their empire for this final assault. They intended to make Earth's destruction visible to every species in the galaxy as a warning against resistance. Admiral Kane coordinated humanity's response from a command station hidden in the asteroid belt. The Unity Protocol network now included over 2 billion humans, creating a collective intelligence that could process information and make decisions faster than any computer. They knew the enemy's plans before the enemy commanders finished making them. The defense of Earth became the largest battle in galactic history. Human ships appeared from every direction, using tactics that the enemy could not predict or counter. They struck at weak points in the Council fleet with surgical precision, then vanished before the enemy could respond. Jake Morrison commanded the strike force that penetrated the enemy's defensive lines and attacked their command ships directly. His crews worked with such perfect coordination that their ships seemed to dance through enemy fire without being touched. They destroyed 3 Council command vessels before the enemy even realized they were under attack. The turning point came when Maya Rodriguez completed her greatest invention. Using advanced Valdari technology combined with human engineering, she created a device that could extend the Unity Protocol's range across entire star systems. When the device activated, every human in the solar system became connected through the protocol simultaneously. The effect was beyond anything they had imagined. 2 billion human minds working together created a collective intelligence that could see patterns and possibilities that no individual could comprehend. They could predict the enemy's movements hours before they happened and coordinate responses across light years of space in real time. The Council fleet found itself fighting an enemy that anticipated their every action. Human forces appeared wherever the enemy was weakest and struck with devastating precision. Council commanders who had never known defeat watched their fleets being systematically destroyed by tactics they could not understand. Overlord Kethmore himself entered the battle, abandoning his energy form to inhabit a massive warship designed to channel his mental powers. He attempted to overwhelm the human network with pure psychic force, but the protocol turned his own weapon against him. The unity of human minds created a barrier that his attacks could not penetrate. The final phase of the battle saw Jake Morrison leading a direct assault on Kethmore's flagship. The ancient overlord tried desperately to turn the human crews against each other, but the protocol made such manipulation impossible. Instead, his attacks only made the humans more determined to work together. When Kethmore's ship was destroyed, the effect rippled through the Council Empire instantly. Species that had been enslaved for millennia suddenly found themselves free from mental manipulation. Many turned immediately against their council masters, while others simply fled to hiding places they had prepared over centuries of secret planning. Admiral Kane stood on the bridge of her flagship and watched the last Council forces retreat from Earth's solar system. Humanity had not just survived the war, they had won it decisively. But she knew that victory was only the beginning. With the Council's empire collapsing, the galaxy was about to enter a new age, and humans would play a central role in shaping what came next. The Unity Protocol network now included not just humans but volunteers from several liberated species who wanted to experience the cooperation and trust that had made human victory possible. The galaxy was learning that strength came not from conquest or manipulation, but from the willing cooperation of free minds working toward common goals. Jake Morrison received reports from exploration fleets across the galaxy. Hundreds of species were emerging from hiding places where they had survived Council rule. Many wanted to learn about the Unity Protocol, while others were content simply to rebuild their civilizations in freedom. The galaxy was becoming a very different place, and humanity was at the center of that transformation. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his ship Aurora's Edge and watched the dead planet grow larger on the main screen. Kepler 442b had no life, no atmosphere, and no reason for anyone to visit it. But the deep space sensors had picked up something strange from its surface. Something that did not belong on a lifeless rock floating in empty space. Jake had been exploring the outer rim of human space for 12 years. He had found new worlds, mapped strange star systems, and discovered things that made scientists back on Earth very excited. But he had never found anything like the readings they were getting from this planet. The signals were old, older than human civilization, and they pulsed with a rhythm that reminded him of a heartbeat. His crew of 25, men and women, worked quietly around him. Engineer Maya Rodriguez checked the landing systems one more time. She was small but tough, and she could fix anything that broke in space. Science Officer Dr. Alex Chen studied the readings on his screen with intense focus. He was the smartest person Jake had ever met, and if Alex looked worried, then Jake paid attention. The ship settled onto the rocky surface with a gentle bump. Through the thick windows, Jake could see nothing but gray rocks and black sky. No wind moved the dust because there was no air. No water had flowed here for millions of years. But somewhere under all that rock and dust, something waited for them. Maya finished her checks and gave Jake a thumbs up. The landing team would be Jake, Alex, and 4 security officers. They put on their heavy spacesuits and checked their air supplies twice. On a dead world like this, a broken suit meant death in minutes. The airlock opened and they stepped onto the surface. Jake felt the crunch of ancient dust under his boots. Their helmet lights cut through the darkness and showed them a landscape that had not changed in eons. But Alex's scanner was beeping faster now. Whatever they were looking for was close. They walked for 30 minutes across the flat ground. Then Alex stopped and pointed ahead. His voice came through the radio with excitement. There was a structure buried in the hillside. It was not made by nature. The walls were too straight, the angles too perfect. Someone had built this thing and then left it here to wait. The entrance was partly blocked by fallen rocks, but Maya had brought cutting tools. She worked for an hour while the others watched and waited. Finally, she stepped back and waved them forward. The way was clear. Inside, their light showed them a corridor that stretched into darkness. The walls were covered with symbols that none of them recognized. Alex took pictures of everything while they moved deeper into the structure. The air in their suits recycled with quiet hums, and their footsteps echoed in the empty halls. The corridor ended in a large round room. In the center stood a device that looked like a crystal tree. It was tall as a person and glowed with soft blue light. The glow pulsed in the same rhythm they had detected from space. Jake approached it carefully while his team spread out around the room. When Jake got within arm's reach of the device, it changed. The blue light became brighter, and the crystal began to hum. Suddenly, images filled the air around them. They saw a city with tall spires and flying vehicles. They saw creatures that looked almost human but with longer arms and silver skin. They saw the same creatures fighting something terrible that came from the stars. Alex worked frantically with his recording equipment. He was capturing everything, but Jake could tell from his voice that he was scared. The images showed the silver-skinned people losing their war. Their cities burned and their people fled to other worlds. But wherever they went, the terrible thing followed them. Then a new image appeared. It was one of the silver people standing in this very room. It spoke, and somehow Jake understood the words even though they were in an alien language. The creature said it was called Valdari, and its people were dying. It said that the enemy did not destroy with weapons or bombs. The enemy turned people against each other, made them fight and hate until they destroyed themselves. The Valdari in the image looked directly at Jake and his team. It said that others would come to this place someday. It hoped they would be smarter than the Valdari had been. It hoped they would learn to work together before it was too late. Then the image faded, and the crystal went dark. Jake and his team returned to their ship in silence. They had found something incredible, but also something terrifying. As they prepared to leave the dead planet, Alex began studying the recordings. What he found made his blood run cold. Back on Earth, things were going wrong. Admiral Lisa Kane sat in her office and read reports that made no sense. Human colonies that had worked together for decades were now fighting over small disagreements. Families were splitting apart over nothing. Workers were sabotaging their own projects. It was happening everywhere humans lived, and it was getting worse. Dr. Alex Chen had been studying alien psychology for years. He worked on Luna Station, far from Earth, where he could think clearly. When Jake's report reached him, Alex began to see a pattern. The same kind of madness that destroyed the Valdari was now affecting humans. Someone, or something, was making people angry and suspicious of each other. Admiral Kane called a secret meeting of human leaders who still seemed unaffected. They met in a shielded room deep under the lunar surface. Jake Morrison was there to tell his story. Maya Rodriguez showed them the alien device. Alex Chen explained what he thought was happening to humanity. The enemy was already here, and they had been working for years to turn humans against themselves. But Jake's discovery gave them hope. The Valdari had failed because they could not unite when it mattered most. Perhaps humans could do better. Perhaps they could find a way to work together before it was too late. Outside the meeting room, across human space, the invisible war continued. People who had loved each other began to fight. Communities that had thrived together started to fall apart. And in the darkness between the stars, ancient eyes watched and waited for humanity to destroy itself. 5 years after the defeat of the Convergence Council, the galaxy had become a place that no one could have imagined. The Unity Protocol had spread to over 200 species, each adapting it to work with their own unique biology and psychology. What had begun as humanity's desperate attempt to save itself had become the foundation for the greatest cooperative alliance in galactic history. Admiral Jake Morrison stood in the observation deck of New Harmony Station, watching ships from dozens of different species working together to build humanity's greatest achievement. The station was enormous, larger than most moons, and it served as the headquarters for the Galactic Cooperative. Representatives from every member species lived and worked there, sharing knowledge and resources freely. The Zephyrians had been among the first to join the cooperative after their defeat in battle. Their warrior culture had initially resisted the idea of cooperation with former enemies, but they discovered that the protocol enhanced their natural honor and courage. Zephyrian warriors working through the protocol became legendary for their willingness to sacrifice themselves to protect others, regardless of species. Maya Rodriguez had become the head of the cooperative's technology development program. She worked with brilliant minds from across the galaxy to solve problems that no single species could handle alone. Their greatest success had been the development of ecological restoration systems that could repair entire worlds damaged by the Council's weapons. The insectoid hive minds from the Terminus cluster had been skeptical of the protocol at first. Their species already shared thoughts naturally, and they worried that human-designed technology might disrupt their complex social structures. But when they tried adapted versions of the protocol, they found that it actually enhanced their natural cooperation, while allowing for individual creativity they had never experienced before. Dr. Alex Chen had established the Institute for Cooperative Psychology on Luna, where scientists from hundreds of species studied the effects of voluntary mental connection. They had discovered that cooperation was not just more effective than competition, it was actually more natural for most intelligent species. The Council's manipulation had worked by suppressing instincts that evolution had developed over millions of years. Captain Ryan Brooks, now Fleet Admiral Brooks, commanded the cooperative's exploration fleets. They traveled to the farthest reaches of the galaxy, making contact with species that had hidden from the Council for millennia. Many of these civilizations had developed in isolation, and they were amazed to learn that cooperation between different species was not only possible, but highly beneficial. Dr. Nina Foster led the effort to establish educational exchanges between member species. Young beings from across the galaxy came to study on each other's worlds, learning new ways of thinking and problem-solving. A human child might spend a year learning patience from the long-lived Eternals, while a young Zephyrian might study human creativity and adaptability. The protocol had evolved far beyond its original design. Each species that joined the network contributed something new to the collective understanding. The artistic melodians shared their ability to express emotions through color and sound. The mathematical processors contributed logical frameworks that helped other species solve complex problems. Humanity's contribution was the original insight that true cooperation required trust and free choice. But the galaxy's transformation was not without challenges. Some species remained hostile to the idea of cooperation, viewing it as weakness or a threat to their independence. The Dominion Wars had started when several militaristic species formed their own alliance to challenge the cooperative's growing influence. Admiral Lisa Kane, now Director General of the cooperative, worked to resolve conflicts through negotiation rather than force. The cooperative had the military strength to destroy any opponent, but using that strength would violate the principles that made the organization successful. Instead, they demonstrated the benefits of cooperation and waited for their enemies to see the advantages for themselves. The most serious challenge came from an unexpected source. Alex Chen's deep space monitoring stations detected signals from beyond the galactic rim that reminded him of the patterns they had seen from the Convergence Council. Something vast and ancient was approaching from intergalactic space, and the AudioBook signals suggested intelligence that dwarfed even the Council's power. The discovery prompted the largest research effort in galactic history. Scientists from every cooperative species worked together to understand the nature of the approaching threat. They called themselves the Watchers, being so old that they remembered the formation of galaxies. They had been observing the Milky Way for millions of years, waiting for it to mature enough to be worth their attention. Jake Morrison led the first expedition to investigate the Watcher signals more closely. His fleet included ships and crews from every major cooperative species, representing the best of galactic cooperation. They traveled beyond the galactic edge into the void between galaxies, where space itself seemed different and older. What they found challenged everything they thought they knew about intelligence and civilization. The Watchers were not a single species but a collective of the oldest minds in the universe. They had guided the development of countless galaxies, nudging young species toward greater cooperation and understanding. The Convergence Council had been an aberration, a failed experiment that the Watchers had finally decided to end. The Watchers revealed that they had been subtly influencing human development for millions of years, preparing humanity to become the catalyst for galactic cooperation. Humans had not discovered the Unity Protocol by accident. They had been guided to find it when the galaxy was ready for the next stage of its development. Maya Rodriguez was invited to visit the Watchers' home, a construct that existed partially in normal space and partially in dimensions that human minds could barely comprehend. She learned that the technology she thought was advanced was primitive compared to what was possible when entire galaxies worked together. The Watchers offered to share their knowledge, but only if the cooperative proved ready for such responsibility. The test came in the form of the Void Crisis. A region of space beyond the galaxy's edge began expanding rapidly, consuming entire star systems and converting their matter into something that existed outside normal reality. The Watchers explained that this was a natural process that occurred when galaxies reached a certain stage of development, but it could be stopped if enough intelligent minds worked together. Admiral Kane coordinated the galaxy-wide response to the crisis. Every member of the cooperative contributed according to their abilities. Humans provided leadership and coordination. Zephyrians served as protectors and warriors. The hive minds managed logistics across impossible scales. The Melodians maintained morale through art and music that transcended species boundaries. The solution required the construction of devices on a scale that challenged imagination. Entire solar systems were converted into components of machines designed to stabilize the fabric of reality itself. The work could only be accomplished through perfect cooperation between trillions of beings working toward a common goal. Jake Morrison commanded the final mission to activate the reality stabilizers. The void had already consumed thousands of star systems and was accelerating toward the galaxy's core. If the stabilizers failed, everything they had built would be destroyed, and the Watchers would abandon the galaxy to its fate. The activation sequence required precise timing across millions of light years. Every species in the cooperative had to play their part exactly when needed with no room for error or hesitation. It was the ultimate test of whether different species could truly work together when survival was at stake. When the stabilizers activated simultaneously, the effect was visible from across the galaxy. The advancing void stopped, then began to retreat as normal space reasserted itself. Entire star systems that had been consumed were restored. Their planets and peoples returned exactly as they had been before the crisis began. The Watchers pronounced the test successful and welcomed the Milky Way galaxy into the community of mature civilizations. They offered to share knowledge and technology that would allow the cooperative to travel between galaxies and participate in projects spanning the entire universe. But they also warned that greater knowledge came with greater responsibility. Admiral Kane accepted the Watchers' offer on behalf of all cooperative species. The galaxy that had once been ruled by fear and manipulation would now contribute to the development of other galaxies throughout the universe. Humanity's journey from a fragmented species to the catalyst for galactic cooperation had become the foundation for something even greater. In the end, Jake Morrison reflected on how much had changed since that first day on the dead world where they found the Valdari message. Humanity had learned that their greatest strength was not their individual abilities, but their capacity to bring others together in common purpose. When humans truly united, they did not conquer galaxies. They lifted them up and helped them reach their full potential. The galaxy continued to grow and change, but now it did so through cooperation rather than conflict.